It started on a quiet night when the giant radio dishes of the International Deep Space Listening Station picked up a strange signal from deep space. The scientists working there were used to hearing noise from stars and planets, but this was different. It was not random. It had rhythm, pattern, and emotion. At first they thought it might be a technical glitch or a coded message from some human satellite. But when they checked again, they realized it came from beyond our galaxy. The signal was faint, broken, and full of interference, but underneath all the noise, there was something that felt alive. Teams from all over the world gathered to study it. Countries that normally competed now worked together. The United States, China, India, Russia, and many others sent their best minds to decode what the signal was saying. In every corner of the Earth, people waited for news. Everyone wanted to know who or what was calling. The scientists worked day and night, comparing tones, running simulations, and using every translation program they could build. Slowly, words began to form, but they were not words made by human mouths. They were cries, soft, trembling, and full of fear. It took days before anyone could truly believe what they were hearing. The message was not a threat. It was not a warning. It was a plea, a desperate call for mercy. The creatures sending it were asking for protection, begging for someone, anyone, to save them from destruction. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. They are coming. They will burn us all. Please help us. The scientists were shaken. For the first time, humanity had proof that intelligent life existed beyond Earth. And the first thing those beings did was beg for help. When the message reached the world's leaders, everything changed. Emergency meetings were held across the planet. The United Nations called a secret assembly. Generals, scientists, and diplomats sat together, staring at the decoded message that played again and again on screens. The room was silent except for the alien voice repeating its cry for mercy. Some said Earth should not interfere. It was too dangerous. If these aliens were being hunted by something powerful enough to destroy entire civilizations, then humanity might be next. Others argued that turning away would be unforgivable. How could humanity ignore a species that was dying before their eyes? The debate went on for days. News of the signal spread, even though governments tried to keep it hidden. Soon the whole world knew. People stood in front of television screens, watching as scientists explained what had happened. Social media exploded with theories and emotions. Some said it was a trap, that another alien race wanted to lure humans into war. Some said it was fate, that humanity was chosen to be the saviors of the universe. Religious leaders spoke about mercy, compassion, and duty. For the first time in history, all of Earth talked about the same thing. In the middle of all this noise, one question kept echoing. Should humanity respond? The idea of talking to another intelligent species was exciting, but the tone of the message filled everyone with dread. These were not conquerors. They were victims. They were afraid. And if something could make a spacefaring civilization afraid, what kind of monster were they running from? Astronomers tracked the source of the signal to a dying star system near the edge of the Andromeda sector. Images sent back by telescopes showed debris, shattered planets, and trails of destruction. Whatever had happened there, it was massive. It looked like an entire solar system had been burned alive. People across Earth began to imagine what it would be like if that happened to them, if something arrived from the stars and tore everything apart. That fear began to turn into determination. Humanity had always been a species that fought back. From the moment humans learned to survive, they never backed down from danger. While politicians argued, the military began to prepare quietly. The Earth Defense Coalition, a group created after the last global conflicts, started gathering ships and soldiers. Officially, it was only for research and observation, but everyone knew that if humanity chose to act, it would not be with soft words. The world's strongest nations began sharing resources and technology. Spaceports worked around the clock. Engineers upgraded weapons that had never been tested before. Humanity was scared. But under that fear was something fierce, a spark of pride and anger that someone out there thought they could destroy life without consequence. Meanwhile, the scientists who had first found the message were still studying it. They discovered that the aliens had used a communication frequency that matched the universal hydrogen line, the most basic signal of the universe. It was clever. It meant they had wanted to be heard by anyone, anywhere. They must have known their message would travel for years, maybe even centuries, through space. Maybe they were already gone. But hope remained that someone was still alive, still waiting. The lead scientist, Dr. Lena Vasquez, stood in front of the Global Council one night. She was tired, her eyes red from sleepless nights, but her voice was steady. "They didn't ask for revenge," she said. "They asked for mercy. Maybe this is our chance to show the universe what humanity really is." Her words touched many. It reminded everyone that mercy did not always mean weakness. Sometimes it meant standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves. As the days passed, the world seemed to hold its breath. People gathered in churches, mosques, and temples to pray for the unknown beings. Children drew pictures of friendly aliens. Soldiers prepared for missions they didn't fully understand. Scientists built new translators to send a reply, and yet no one could agree on what to say. How do you answer a cry for mercy from another world? What promise could you give that wouldn't be a lie? Then something strange happened. Another part of the message was decoded, one that had been too damaged to understand before. It showed an image, grainy and broken but clear enough to see shapes. The aliens were humanoid in form but thinner, with pale, shining skin and eyes that looked like glass. Behind them, the sky burned. Their cities were in flames, and massive, dark shapes moved across the horizon. Machines or creatures, no one could tell. The final frame showed one of the aliens looking into the camera, their mouth open as if to speak, and then the screen went dark. That image spread faster than any news before. Humanity could not look away. It wasn't science fiction anymore. It was real, and it was terrifying. The public began to demand action. They didn't just want the government to respond, they wanted to send help. People volunteered to join whatever mission would go. Billions of voices rose together, shouting for humanity to do something. Politicians could no longer stall. In the midst of the growing pressure, the United Nations finally made an announcement. The message would be answered. Humanity would not ignore the plea. The crowd outside the UN headquarters cheered, but there was fear too. No one knew what would happen next. Would humanity be walking into a war far beyond their understanding? Would they be saving a race or awakening something worse? In the control room of the listening station, Dr. Vasquez stood again in front of the microphone. Around her, screens flickered with alien symbols. She took a deep breath and sent humanity's first reply. It was short, translated into every frequency they could broadcast. "We heard your cry. You are not alone." Across the world, every radio telescope turned toward the stars, sending the same message. Millions watched as the words traveled into the darkness, carried by invisible waves of energy. And as the message vanished into space, people felt a strange mix of hope and dread. They had finally spoken to another world. But what would come back? No one knew. Somewhere beyond the stars, a dying race had asked for mercy. On Earth, humanity had decided to answer. Yet deep inside, every person felt the same quiet thought. What if the act of mercy would one day bring war? The night sky looked the same as always, full of cold, shining stars. But from that night on, everyone who looked up knew the universe was not empty. It was alive, and now humanity had stepped into its story. The world changed completely after humanity sent that short reply into the stars. People everywhere waited for an answer, checking news channels every hour, hoping to hear that something, anything, had come back. But space is silent, and days passed with no reply. Still, the message of mercy kept echoing in human hearts. The fear and sadness in that alien voice could not be forgotten. Slowly, the idea began to take root that maybe it wasn't enough just to send words. Maybe humanity had to do more. In secret meetings, the leaders of the Earth Defense Coalition gathered. They were the most powerful military and political figures from every major nation. The room was full of tension, the air heavy with what was about to be decided. Some wanted to wait, to study the situation before doing anything. Others believed waiting would mean death, not for humans, but for the beings who had begged for help. Admiral Elias Kane, a man known for his sharp mind and iron will, stood up during one of those meetings and said something that silenced the entire room. "If they die while we sit here talking, then their blood is on us. Humanity cannot pretend to be civilized if we ignore a cry for mercy." His words struck deep. Kane was not known for showing emotion, but his voice carried conviction that none could argue with. After hours of discussion, the decision was made. Humanity would not stand aside. Earth would send help, but not in the form of soft aid or empty promises. They would send protection. They would send power. They would send an armada unlike anything that had ever existed. News of the decision spread like wildfire. The world erupted with mixed emotions. Some celebrated, proud that humanity had chosen to act. Others protested, fearing that humans were rushing into a war they didn't understand. But the decision had been made, and the wheels of destiny had started turning. In massive shipyards orbiting Earth and the Moon, thousands of engineers began working without rest. Old warships were refitted, new ones were built, and secret projects hidden for decades were finally revealed. Space became a hive of activity. Cargo ships carried steel, plasma cores, and weapons to the shipyards. Giant cranes lifted entire sections of battleships into place. The hum of machinery and the sparks of welding torches lit the darkness of space like a second sunrise. Admiral Kane took command of the project. His experience in deep space warfare and his reputation for making impossible missions succeed made him the natural leader. The fleet that would become known as the Armada of Mercy began to take shape under his command. It was not made for peace. It was made for survival. Each ship carried the latest in human technology. Rail cannons capable of piercing asteroids, plasma torpedoes that could melt armor in seconds, and shields that could withstand solar flares. But Kane didn't just want strength. He wanted unity. He ordered that every nation, every people have representation in the Armada. This must not be Earth's fleet, he said. It must be humanity's fleet. And so it became. The United States sent carriers the size of cities. China sent massive dreadnoughts designed for long-range combat. Russia provided nuclear war platforms. India contributed advanced drone systems. Europe sent medical and rescue ships. Even small countries that had never been part of space defense sent crews and supplies. Humanity was no longer a collection of nations. It had become one force united under a single mission, to answer the plea from the stars. Back on Earth, families watched as their loved ones prepared to leave. Soldiers hugged their children goodbye. Scientists waved to friends as they boarded shuttles to join the fleet. The world held its breath as the great ships began to rise from the surface, climbing into the black sky. Billions watched the launch on screens, their hearts pounding with pride and fear. For the first time, humanity was not going to war with itself. It was going to war for another species. In the following months, training began. Thousands of pilots practiced new flight maneuvers in zero gravity. Engineers tested weapons in orbit, causing bursts of light that looked like small suns. The Armada grew larger every week until its shadow covered the stars. The fleet had over 10,000 ships, each one carrying soldiers, medics, and scientists. It was the largest and most powerful force ever built by humankind. During one late-night inspection, Admiral Kane stood on the command deck of the flagship, Sol Invictus, staring at the glowing planet below. A young officer beside him asked quietly, "Sir, do you think we're doing the right thing?" Kane didn't answer immediately. He looked out at Earth, then at the stars beyond. "Right or wrong," he said, "it's what we must do. Mercy isn't about comfort. It's about doing what others can't." Those words spread across the fleet and became its unofficial motto. While the fleet prepared, scientists continued studying the original alien message. More fragments were decoded, showing images of strange structures, destroyed worlds, and monstrous ships made of organic material. The enemy, whoever they were, looked like a force of nature. Some scientists warned that humanity might not be ready for what awaited them, but the preparations continued. Fear could no longer stop them. Humanity had made a promise, and breaking it would mean breaking everything they stood for. When the day of departure arrived, the scene was unforgettable. Spaceports across the world broadcast live as the fleet prepared for the hyperspace jump. Crowds gathered in every city, waving flags, holding hands, praying, crying, cheering. The sound of engines roared through the skies as the Armada's ships formed patterns in orbit, each one shining like a star. Admiral Kane gave a final message to Earth from his command ship. His voice echoed across every screen, calm but filled with purpose. "We are the children of Earth. Today we take our first step into the unknown, not as conquerors but as protectors. To those who begged for mercy, humanity is coming." The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Each second felt like eternity. Scientists monitored power levels while pilots checked systems. The engines of thousands of ships lit up like blue fire. When the final second passed, the fleet vanished into the void, leaving only trails of light behind. For a long moment, Earth was silent. Then the entire planet erupted into cheers. People hugged strangers in the streets. Children pointed at the sky, imagining the ship sailing through the stars. News anchors spoke of a new age for humanity, a time when humans no longer fought over borders but stood united under one sky. But beneath the celebration there was still fear. No one knew what the Armada would find. In deep space, the ships traveled together in formation. Inside, soldiers trained, engineers maintained systems, and scientists studied maps of the Andromeda sector. The journey would take weeks, even with hyperspace engines. During that time, Kane spent long hours reviewing intelligence reports and battle simulations. He knew this mission was not just about helping another race, it was about proving humanity's place in the universe. If they succeeded, humanity would be known as defenders. If they failed, they would vanish like countless civilizations before them. One night, as the fleet sailed through the endless dark, the communication officers picked up faint echoes on the sensors, remnants of the alien distress signal. It was weaker than before, but still there, like a heartbeat fading slowly. The crew grew quiet, listening as the sound filled the bridge. It reminded everyone why they were there. It wasn't glory they were chasing. It was mercy. Back on Earth, news of the fleet's progress brought hope to billions. Songs were written, monuments built, and prayers offered. The Armada became a symbol, not just of power but of compassion. Children learned its story in schools before it even ended. Humanity, for the first time in history, believed in something bigger than itself. Admiral Kane knew the risks, but he also knew that humanity could not turn back. He often walked through the ship's corridors, talking to the crew, listening to their fears. Some missed home, some doubted they would return, but all of them believed they were doing something that mattered. Every person aboard those ships carried the same thought in their hearts, that somewhere out there, frightened beings were waiting for the light of human ships to appear in their dark skies. As the fleet drew closer to the alien system, tension grew. The scans began picking up traces of destroyed planets and faint energy signatures. The nightmare that the aliens had described might still be out there, yet even as fear crept in, no one turned away. Humanity had come too far to stop. They were ready, not just to help, but to fight if they had to. The engines hummed softly, carrying them into the unknown, and far behind them, Earth spun quietly in the sunlight, waiting for the day her children would return, if they ever did. Humanity had made its choice. The aliens had asked for mercy, and humanity had chosen to answer. But this mercy would not come with gentle hands or soft voices. It would come with ships of steel, with courage born from centuries of struggle, and with hearts that refused to watch another civilization die. After weeks of traveling through the endless darkness of space, the human armada finally reached the edge of the alien star system. The first thing they saw on their screens was fire, massive storms of burning debris floating where planets once had been. Everyone on the bridge of the flagship fell silent. What had once been a living world was now just ashes scattered across space. The scan showed fragments of cities, broken ships, and energy signatures fading away like dying breaths. Humanity had arrived, but what they found was tragedy. Admiral Elias Kane stood at the front of the command deck, staring at the sight in disbelief. Even he, a man hardened by decades of battle, had never seen destruction like this. So this, he whispered, is what they were running from. His voice was low, but the crew heard him, and the words sent chills down their spines. Every screen showed ruins stretching for millions of kilometers. There were no clear signs of life at first, only silence, static, and the haunting glow of what used to be a civilization. The fleet moved slowly through the remains, their massive ships gliding between shattered moons and burning wreckage. The wreckage wasn't just metal. Some of it looked organic, ships made of bone-like structures and glowing veins. Whatever had attacked this place hadn't just destroyed the aliens' homes, it had erased their history. Scientists aboard the research ships began scanning the debris. Some pieces still carried traces of energy unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was powerful but strange, almost alive. The scientists could hardly believe what they were studying. Hours later, one of the smaller patrol ships picked up a weak distress beacon. It was faint, almost lost in the static, but it was definitely artificial. The entire armada shifted direction to follow it. The signal led them toward the ruins of a moon that had been torn in half. As they approached, they saw something moving between the craters, tiny flickers of light too organized to be random. Admiral Kane ordered the rescue teams to prepare. "There are survivors," he said, his voice sharp but calm. When the first landing team reached the surface, they found the remains of underground shelters. Inside were beings unlike anything humans had ever seen. Thin, pale creatures with smooth skin that shimmered faintly in the light. Their eyes were large and glass-like, glowing softly in the dark. They were weak, injured, and starving, but alive. The humans worked quickly, giving them medical care and food. The aliens couldn't speak human language, but through gestures and expressions it was clear. They were terrified. Every time a loud sound echoed, they flinched as if expecting another attack. Doctors, engineers, and translators from the fleet gathered to help. They used advanced AI programs to begin understanding the aliens' language. It took days, but slowly, meaning began to emerge. The survivors told their story, and it sent shock through the entire fleet. They called their enemy the Krith Dominion. The Krith were not like humans or them, they were predators. They invaded not for resources or power, but for consumption. They drained worlds dry, using the energy and matter of other species to grow their own monstrous empire. The Krith ships were described as living organisms, huge biomachines that fed on everything they touched. The aliens' homeworld had fallen in days. Their fleets had tried to fight back, but every time they destroyed one Krith ship, 2 more would appear. When their cities began to burn, the survivors sent their desperate message into space. The message that humanity had received. After that, they hid underground waiting for death. And then, against all hope, human ships had appeared in their sky. When the translation was complete, Admiral Kane met with the alien leader, a frail being named Sarai. Through a translator, she asked him a simple question. "Did you come to protect us?" Kane looked at her for a long moment. The answer he gave would echo through history. "No," he said. "We came to end this." The translation machine repeated his words in the alien language, and Sarai's eyes widened. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but she felt the weight in his voice. Humanity was not here to hide or run. They were here to fight. In the days that followed, the fleet turned the ruins of the alien world into a base of operations. Repair ships began rebuilding damaged human vessels, while medics treated thousands of rescued aliens. Scientists analyzed the technology left behind by the Krith, trying to understand how such creatures could even exist. The data they found was terrifying. The Krith used biotechnology powered by harvested life force. Their ships grew stronger with every planet they consumed. If humanity didn't stop them here one day, Earth might be next. Kane gathered his senior officers for a meeting. The room was quiet, lit only by holograms of the destroyed system. "They think they can erase civilizations," Kane said, his eyes fixed on the glowing map. "They think mercy means weakness. Let's teach them what mercy looks like when it's backed by humanity." His officers nodded. Every man and woman in that room understood that a war was coming. One that would decide not just the fate of these aliens, but of humanity itself. Meanwhile, life aboard the fleet carried on with a strange mix of hope and fear. Soldiers trained harder than ever, knowing they would soon face an enemy unlike anything they had fought before. Scientists worked through sleepless nights, studying alien biology and weapon designs. Some of them grew close to the rescued aliens, learning from their knowledge of the stars. Despite the differences in appearance and language, something human connected them: loss, fear, and the will to survive. One evening, as the two species stood side by side, a group of alien children looked out from the observation deck at the human ships floating above their broken world. One of them touched the glass and said something softly. The translator spoke for her. "Your stars are beautiful." A human pilot beside her smiled sadly. "They're your stars too now," he said. It was a small moment, but it reminded everyone why they were there. Not for conquest, but for compassion. The calm didn't last long. Scouts at the edge of the system detected movement, massive energy readings heading toward them. The Krith were returning. Their fleet was vast, a dark swarm moving through space like a living storm. The ships pulsed with red light, their movement smooth and organic. Humanity had been discovered. The aliens who had sent the distress signal looked terrified, but Admiral Kane didn't flinch. He turned to his officers and said, "Signal all ships. Defensive formation. If they want to finish what they started, we'll give them a reason to regret it." As alarms echoed through the fleet, soldiers ran to their stations. The massive guns of the human warships powered up, glowing with light. Pilots climbed into their fighters, whispering good luck to one another. The surviving aliens watched from safety zones aboard the medical ships, praying silently for their saviors. For the first time in centuries, they were not alone in the fight. In the command center, Kane watched the enemy fleet appear on the scanners. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one bigger than anything the humans had faced before. Their shapes were twisted, full of tentacles and glowing cores that looked like beating hearts. The air in the command deck felt heavy, filled with the tension of what was about to happen. Kane stood tall, hands clasped behind his back. "We didn't come all this way to hide," he said. "We came to show them what it means to stand together." Before the Krith could attack, Kane ordered the fleet to fire warning shots, massive energy beams that lit up the darkness. The blasts tore through the void and slammed into the enemy formation, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The message was clear: humanity would not bow. As the first explosions flashed across the stars, the surviving aliens looked up at the bright lights spreading through the sky. To them, it looked like dawn, like the return of hope. The beings who had once begged for mercy now saw what humanity's answer truly meant: the calm before the storm ended. The Krith responded with a roar that shook the void, their ships accelerating toward the human fleet. Kane gave the final command, his voice steady: "Hold the line." The words echoed through every ship in the Armada. Engines flared, weapons fired, and the darkness of space turned into a battlefield of light and destruction. The war for survival had begun, and for the first time the aliens who had asked for mercy witnessed what it meant when humanity chose to answer, not with surrender, but with the deadliest armada ever created. The silence before the battle was heavy, almost painful. Every human soldier, pilot, and officer could feel the weight of what was about to happen. The vastness of space around them was filled with wreckage, glowing dust, and the faint hum of engines ready for war. On every screen, the enemy fleet, the Krith Dominion, appeared larger and darker by the second. It looked less like a fleet and more like a storm of monsters. Their ships were not made of metal, but of living tissue that pulsed with light as if they were alive and breathing. Some were as big as cities, some small and fast, darting like insects. The entire armada moved with one purpose: to destroy. Admiral Elias Kane stood at the front of the flagship's command deck, his eyes fixed on the approaching horde. The bridge lights dimmed to battle mode, casting a blue glow across the crew's faces. There was no panic, only focus. Kane's voice came through the speakers across the fleet, calm and steady. "Remember who you are. Remember what you fight for. We stand not for conquest, but for mercy. But if they want war, we'll give them something they'll never forget." Across thousands of ships, men and women prepared for the fight. Pilots strapped into their cockpits, their hands trembling slightly before settling on the controls. Engineers secured power cores, medics readied emergency bays, and officers repeated orders through the communication lines. Outside, the alien survivors watched in silence, their glowing eyes full of fear and hope. They had seen what the Krith could do, but now, for the first time, they were seeing what humanity could become when pushed to its limits. The first wave came fast. The Krith didn't speak or send any warning, they simply attacked. Their living ships released swarms of smaller creatures that looked like metal insects, each one sharp enough to pierce armor. The human fleet responded instantly. Fighters launched in clouds, moving like silver lightning through the void. Missiles streaked out from carriers, leaving trails of fire behind. The battle had begun. The space between the two forces lit up like a second sun. Explosions flashed, turning darkness into blinding light. Human ships fought in perfect formation, protecting each other, while the Krith attacked with wild, animal-like speed. The sound of weapons and alarms filled every ship. One by one, enemy creatures exploded under the power of human railguns and plasma cannons. But the Krith were endless. For every ship destroyed, 2 more appeared. Admiral Kane gave orders with precision. "Group 7, flank left. Keep shields tight on the med bays. Dreadnought line, hold your fire until the main cluster passes." His voice kept everyone steady. He was the anchor in the chaos. Even as ships were lost and debris filled the screens, he never raised his voice, never faltered. His calmness became the heart of the fleet. One of the Krith's giant bioships, the size of a moon, moved toward the center of the human formation. Its surface was covered in glowing veins, and inside it pulsed what looked like a giant beating heart. It began releasing energy waves that tore through smaller ships like paper. Kane saw it and gave a simple command: "Bring the Erebus forward." The Erebus was humanity's most powerful ship, a planet cracker built in secret, designed for only one purpose: to destroy whatever stood against it. It moved slowly, heavy and massive, its hull lined with weapons. As it powered up, its central cannon began to glow with white-hot energy. Every other ship in the fleet moved aside, giving it a clear line of fire. The Krith bioship turned toward the Erebus, sensing the threat. It fired a beam of pure energy that hit the human ship's shields. The force was so strong it made the entire armada shake. The crew aboard the Erebus struggled to hold the line. "Shields down to 60%, shouted the operator. But the ship didn't stop. Its core reached full power. Admiral Kane gave the final order. Fire. The beam that erupted from the Erebus was brighter than a star. It cut through the void and slammed directly into the Krith's massive ship. For a few seconds, everything went silent. Then came the explosion. The alien ship burst apart in a wave of fire and energy that lit up the entire system. The light was so bright it was seen from light years away. The shockwave tore through the enemy lines, breaking their formation. The humans cheered across every channel. For the first time, the Krith had been forced to retreat, but the victory came at a cost. Hundreds of human ships had been destroyed. Thousands of lives were lost in the first battle alone. The medical ships were full of wounded soldiers, and the wreckage floated silently through the battlefield. Even in triumph, the fleet mourned. Kane watched the reports come in, his jaw tight. "War is never clean," he said quietly. But this was necessary. The Krith regrouped, learning from their defeat. They were not mindless beasts. They were a hive intelligence, adapting with every encounter. The next attack came from multiple directions at once. Human ships were forced to divide, fighting on several fronts. The battles raged for days. Each hour felt like a lifetime. Space was filled with fire, smoke, and drifting bodies of both metal and flesh. The stars themselves seemed dimmer under the shadow of war. The fleet's strategy began to change. Kane and his commanders used human unpredictability to their advantage. Unlike the Krith, who followed patterns, humans could think freely, act creatively. Pilots began using bait tactics, leading enemy ships into ambushes. Drone swarms attacked from blind spots. Stealth ships slipped behind enemy lines to destroy their power cores. Humanity turned the battlefield into a chessboard, and every move was designed to push the Krith back one step at a time. In one fierce encounter, the enemy managed to breach the defenses near the alien refugee ships. The surviving aliens screamed in terror as the living weapons closed in. A small group of human fighters broke formation to protect them, even though it meant certain death. Their commander, Captain Rios, sent his last transmission. "Tell Earth, we did what was right." His ship rammed the Krith vessel head-on, causing both to explode. The refugees were saved, but Rios and his crew were gone. His name spread through the fleet like a legend. Humanity was no longer fighting just to win. They were fighting to protect something pure. The war stretched on, turning days into weeks. The human armada began to wear down, but their spirit never broke. Whenever ships were lost, reinforcements from Earth arrived through long-distance jumps. Whenever morale fell, messages from home reminded them that billions of people were watching, praying for their victory. Humanity's strength wasn't just in weapons, it was in heart. Then came the turning point. The Krith launched their largest vessel, a monstrous bioship bigger than a small planet, pulsing with red light and covered in writhing tentacles. It moved slowly but carried unimaginable power. Scans showed that it contained thousands of smaller ships inside it, ready to burst out. If it reached the human fleet, everything would be lost. Kane gathered his commanders. There was only one option left. The Erebus would attack directly, even if it meant its destruction. The crew of the Erebus knew what it meant, but no one refused. They volunteered. As the massive ship moved toward the enemy, the rest of the fleet formed a protective wall behind it. The Krith monster opened fire first. Energy beams ripped through space, striking the Erebus and tearing chunks from its hull. Still, it kept going. Inside, the crew worked without fear. The weapon core charged, glowing brighter and brighter. Admiral Kane watched from his flagship, his hands clenched tightly behind his back. "Hold steady," he whispered. When the Erebus reached firing range, its captain sent one final message to the fleet. "For the ones who begged for mercy, and for the ones who will never beg again." Then the ship fired. The explosion that followed was like the birth of a new sun. The shockwave destroyed the Krith's largest ship and vaporized everything around it. The Erebus was gone, but it had taken the heart of the enemy with it. For the first time in the war, the Krith began to retreat. Their hive communication broke down, their ships scattered. The human armada pressed forward, driving them back into the void. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was filled with grief. The cost of victory was written in every broken hull, every lost name. Admiral Kane stood in the command deck, watching the remains of both fleets drift through the stars. The survivors of the alien race sent messages of gratitude. They bowed their heads and called the humans the guardians of mercy. But Kane didn't smile. His voice was calm, heavy with meaning. Mercy, he said, isn't weakness. It's the strength to do what others cannot. And so, among the burning wrecks and broken worlds, humanity had proven itself, not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as protectors who carried mercy on the wings of war. The Krith Dominion had learned to fear the name of Earth, and the universe had witnessed the day humanity answered a cry for help with the deadliest armada ever created. The stars were quiet again. After months of fire and death, space had fallen into a strange kind of silence. The human fleet drifted among the ruins of battle, surrounded by pieces of broken ships and fading light. The war was over, but the cost of victory hung heavy in every heart. The Krith Dominion had been defeated, their hive shattered, their monstrous ships turned to dust. Yet the price humanity paid could never be forgotten. Thousands of ships had been destroyed, millions of lives lost, and entire colonies burned during the endless fights. Admiral Elias Kane stood in the observation deck of his flagship, watching the floating debris move slowly through the stars. Every piece reminded him of the lives that had been part of this war. Friends, soldiers, engineers, pilots, people who had laughed, dreamed, and believed they would return home. But now they were gone. The space that once echoed with explosions and screams was now just quiet. For Kane, the silence was louder than any battle cry. In the communication room, reports from across the galaxy kept coming in. The alien survivors, the ones who had sent the original cry for mercy, were rebuilding their worlds with human help. The armada that once brought destruction was now bringing life. Human cargo ships carried food, medicine, and rebuilding materials. Soldiers who had once fired weapons were now clearing wreckage and building shelters. The galaxy watched in awe. The same species that had unleashed death on the Krith now moved with compassion and care, helping those who had suffered. But not everyone saw it that way. Across human colonies, people were divided. Some called the war a necessary act of defense, a message that no one should threaten Earth again. Others questioned the cost, asking whether humanity had become what it once feared. Too powerful, too ruthless. News channels replayed the footage of the final explosion of the Erebus, calling it both heroic and terrifying. The name Armada of Mercy became a symbol of strength and warning. Admiral Kane was called to Earth for a council meeting. When his ship entered orbit, he looked down at the blue planet that was still beautiful, still alive, untouched by the horror of space war. As he landed, crowds filled the streets to greet the returning fleet. They cheered, waved flags, and called the soldiers heroes. But among the cheers were also quiet eyes, people who had lost someone in the war. Kane could see both pride and pain in their faces. The meeting took place in the Great Hall of Nations. Leaders from Earth and the allied alien races gathered around a long circular table. The atmosphere was tense. The human representatives wanted to discuss rebuilding, while the alien leaders wanted assurances that humanity's power would never be turned against them. Kane stood before them, tall and calm, his uniform showing the scars of battle. When asked about humanity's intentions, he spoke simply, his voice steady and clear. "We did not come to rule," he said. "We came because someone asked for mercy. And mercy is not about weakness or strength, it's about choice. We chose to act not for glory but to protect. But every choice comes with a cost. We will not hide from it." The aliens listened in silence. Many of them still feared humans, for they had seen the fury of the human armada, the unstoppable firepower, the fearless soldiers, the willingness to sacrifice everything. Yet they had also seen humanity stay after victory, helping rebuild, not conquer. It was a contradiction they could not fully understand. One alien leader finally stood up and said, "You carry both mercy and destruction in your hands. The galaxy will remember this." Kane bowed his head slightly and replied, "Then let them remember both, because that is what we are." Over the following months, humanity helped the refugees settle on safer planets. Engineers built artificial atmospheres. Doctors treated alien diseases, and children of different species began learning together. Slowly, trust began to grow. The name Earth was no longer spoken with fear, but with respect. the Krith remnants scattered across the galaxy, too weak to fight, too broken to threaten again. Their hive mind no longer had a leader, and without direction they turned on each other until they vanished into darkness. Still, peace did not come easily to the human soldiers. Many struggled to adapt to normal life after the horrors they had seen. Some dreamed of the endless darkness, the screaming of engines, the blinding light of explosions. The sound of the Erebus's final blast still echoed in their minds. Captain Rios's sacrifice was remembered across the fleet. His name was carved into monuments and whispered in every academy as a reminder of courage. The phrase, "Tell Earth, we did what was right," became a symbol of the war's spirit. Admiral Kane often visited the memorial built in orbit around Mars. It was a great ring of metal made from the wreckage of ships that never returned. Every panel carried the names of the fallen, human and alien alike. He would stand there for hours, reading the names one by one. Sometimes he would speak quietly as if talking to them. "We did it," he would say. "You gave your lives and the galaxy is free, but I wish it hadn't cost so much." Back on Earth, children grew up hearing stories about the Day of Mercy. Teachers told them how humanity had answered a desperate cry from the stars, how they fought not for power but for protection. Artists painted the battles, musicians wrote songs about the heroes, and poets spoke of the fire and silence of space. Yet there was always a shadow behind the pride, the understanding that power and mercy are two sides of the same blade. Years later, when the first peace fleet was formed, a group of ships meant to keep the galaxy safe under mutual protection, it was named the Erebus Accord. The flagship of the fleet bore the same name, built from the same design but with one difference: it carried no weapons. Instead, it was filled with diplomats, scientists, and healers. It symbolized humanity's promise that the Armada would never again rise for destruction unless mercy was in danger. Admiral Kane retired quietly, refusing all political offers. He moved to a small observatory on one of Earth's moons, where he spent his last years watching the stars. Visitors who came to see him often asked if he regretted anything. His answer was always the same. "Regret is useless," he would say softly. "But remembrance is necessary. If we forget what war costs, we'll repeat it." One night, as he looked out into the endless sky, he saw a faint light blinking among the stars, a signal from the alien worlds they had once saved. It was a message of peace and friendship. He smiled faintly. "That's what mercy looks like," he whispered. "Not in fire, but in light." Far away on one of those alien worlds, a small monument stood in the center of a city rebuilt from ashes. At its base was a plaque written in both human and alien languages. It read, "They came when we begged for mercy. They brought fire, but from that fire life was reborn." Humanity answered. And the stars changed forever. And indeed, the stars had changed. The galaxy had seen humanity's dual nature, their unmatched strength and their deep compassion. They had proven that mercy was not weakness, but the courage to fight when others could not, to protect when others ran. The story of the Armada of Mercy spread through time, told again and again as a lesson and a warning. In every corner of space, in every whisper between worlds, the memory lived on. The humans, the ones who had answered the call for mercy, were no longer just inhabitants of a single blue planet. They were guardians of the galaxy's conscience, protectors of the helpless, and reminders that even in the darkest times, light can come from the most unexpected place. Generations later, when new explorers set out to the farthest stars, they carried the same emblem that had once flown over the fleet, a simple symbol of Earth surrounded by wings of fire. It was a promise to the universe that humanity would always answer when mercy called. And somewhere among the stars, the spirits of those who had fought and fallen watched in silence, knowing that their sacrifice had built something far greater than victory. The story of how aliens once asked for mercy, and how humanity answered with the Deadliest Armada, became more than history. It became legend. A story not of war, but of what it means to be human. Fierce, flawed, but filled with a heart that could burn brighter than any star.